Hello, everyone, and thank you for joining us for getting the maximum ROI from your ERP project and beyond. Our goal today is to provide you with beneficial insights that will help you avoid mistakes and get the most out of your investment as your organization prepares for ERP in the new year. Our speaker today is George TRUDELL. George has over 30 years of supply chain and technology experience in helping mid-sized manufacturing and distribution companies improve their businesses. George has worked in consulting for over 15 years. He has deep experience with both process and discrete clients and ERP projects. George is APIC certified and has taught classes and spoken at conferences on the topics of business process improvement, ERP selection and implementation, cloud ERP vendors, and deployment options for manufacturers. To get us started, let's take a brief moment to let you know that Ultra Consultants is serving as your host today. It's important to note that Ultra Consultants is a vendor-independent consulting firm. We have served hundreds of customers, thousands of team members across millions of enterprise users, resulting in billions in business value. As an independent consulting firm, we work fully with our clients' interests in getting the best business performance out of your enterprise software projects. Our goal is for you and your company to get your best business processes in place to get the most for your enterprise system. We don't sell or promote any related enterprise software or services, and we do not receive any payment from any software vendors that we bring to our customers to consider for their project. What we do is offer a completely objective enterprise technology expertise for systems such as ERP, and we add to that our business process management and business process improvement expertise for the manufacturing and distribution industries. Within those projects, we have worked with over 30 different ERP vendor systems in project planning, system selection, and in system implementation. And those ERP projects include warehouse and supply chain software, as well as product lifecycle, MES, sales, and marketing, field service as well. We have relationships with over 50 software vendors across tier 1, 2, and 3 categories. And in those tiers is where we categorize vendors according to the size of companies they sell. And we maintain our relationships with all of those vendors in multiple ways. Through our contact with these vendors during our client engagements, monthly vendor briefings with the vendors, and we have briefings with their partner firms that specialize in industry or specialize with a vendor's product line. We also have annual briefings with each vendor and attend as many of their shows and conferences as possible to keep ourselves and our clients educated on their company, products, and what makes each company competitive. As we look at ERP projects together with our clients, each organization's project journey is unique, but there are 3 things common to every project. There is risk, projects are costly, projects are complex. Because of these 3 factors, risk, cost, and complexity are inherent in ERP projects. We offer business process improvement services as well as additional services to mitigate those risks. After BPI comes technology selection and implementation services, all which leads to business transformation. Also, the consistent thread throughout all of these services and their phases is risk and change management, and project management as well. Risk management, change management, and project management start from day 1, and we've designed these services not to displace your project manager or the vendor project manager, but to support your responsibilities during the project. We are here to partner with you and help you mitigate those risk factors, maintain your cost, and make sure that the complexity of the project does not get out of hand and that you keep your focus on your project goals. And now, without further ado, I will hand it over to today's host, George TRUDELL, to lead the discussion. George?
One thing I wanted to go back to, Kristen, is our clients by industry. Being vendor independent, I think it's really important for us to understand that we're here to guide you through the education selection process and that we have in-depth knowledge throughout all these industries. So we're also your partner for helping you discover how to make improvements throughout the organization with those chosen technologies. And since 1994, manufacturers and distributors throughout North America, as well as companies with global operations, have teamed with us. I think it's really important, and the reason I wanted to come back to this is, as we start to look at systems, it's really important to understand these verticals because the vendors themselves and their capabilities key off of these verticals. So that's why it's a really important fact I wanted to bring out. So the beginning point of the project, prior to actually even looking at industries and what vendors fit, is to really define your business case for change. And to do so, the case for an ERP in your organization may be obvious, or it may require a lot of people need to be convinced of that need. Or you might be somewhere in the middle, right? When it comes to manufacturing, there's intuitively obvious investments that need to be maintained, replaced, or upgraded so that you can maintain the viable business. Outdated machinery or legacy technology are examples. However, there's investments that are not so obvious, such as those you're seeking to make in the long-term transformations of your business, becoming more efficient with internal operations, maximizing your revenue streams and profitability. And these are more strategic activities that will touch on your overall operational effectiveness. Oops, sorry about that. So now that we see there are many different manufacturing companies that are trying to achieve this leadership in the industry or remain competitive while responding to the cost pressures, they're doing so through operational improvements, using technology to streamline workflow, using S&OP to manage your overall business. Having the right ERP system and vendor in place is a big part of these transformations. So ERP transformations, of course, are more than software that's simply installed and maintained. Implementing ERP and redefining the business processes that go along with it affect transformation and your business. If it's planned and executed properly, an ERP project is business transformation. It's not just that the implementation will take a long time, but you have to be aware of your chances, the changes, and you must be sustained in those changes. So since ERP business transformation with an eye on making operational or internal improvements, this is going to require investment in time and hours and money is equally important in planning. Calculating and maximizing your meaningful ROI from the ERP project is a challenge for most small to mid-sized manufacturers. The cost of a new or upgraded system are easy to identify, but what to select, to measure, and how to do it is more difficult. With that in mind, we're going to look at a business case for change, business case for change in action, ROI details, investing in people, and the best team structure. Okay, now next slide. You know, as we look at business transformation, we're going to require some investment. Of course, this is fundamental to any project that will require your business to move forward in, right? You know, if we're going to do anything, it's going to require some investment, whether it's investment in new or upgraded machinery or legacy technology or an investment in improving internal operations like an ERP to help run and maintain your business. However, any investment must first have its foundation justified in business case for change. So in the context of investment in ERP, a proper business case will be your investment. It needs to be well-defined, right, with scope and measurable objectives and expectations. It has to be appropriately funded, right? If we get in there and we don't have the money at the end, that's not going to help us out any. It also has to have its expectations aligned with the company's objectives and strategies. This is really important. We really should be starting the project to understand that. And of course, there's dollars that you're going to want to spend on the product and the vendor services or implementation partner and follow-on service such as maintenance, hosting, and subscription fees. So you need to understand all the costs. And lastly, and most importantly, a critical element of the overall business case is to understand that there are multiple components of your investment that deal with internal costs and sacrifices that you need to make to run your project. This is an area that's not easy to quantify, and it's hard numbers and dollars that when you get down to it. Okay, so as we look at these internal costs, include backfilling resources, change management, internal project management, training and practice time to learn the new processes and competencies. You know, taking people out of their day-to-day role of what they normally do and redirecting them into the project. Backfilling those resources as needed is a large part of the cost. Investing in training and education to bring the people up to speed on the new processes and how the technology within the new processes will affect the business. Also, you need to know what is the continuous improvement plan after the implementation. That's something that's so critical. Many people miss the future of where we're going. All of these have to be considered and promoted within a project in order to maximize your ROI. Okay, so as we move forward then, This isn't just about selecting the right software and performing an installation, right? We need to also know how to perform an ERP selection, so we need to find the right vendor and the right solution for us. Many of this require, the 5 things we need to do are we need to do a requirements analysis, we need to understand our future state design, where we want to go, we need to understand how to identify improvement opportunities. This is critical for the ROI. We need to quantify those improvement opportunities, and then we need to compose a transformation plan for this future state roadmap that should go well beyond the actual go live date. So that's where the continuous improvement aspect comes in. Okay, at Ultra we've defined 5 factors in evaluating an ERP system. The first 2 factors have to do with software and license costs. Every ERP evaluation has features and functions at the very beginning. Does the vendor offer and support the functions that your organization needs? How will the features and functions improve your business processes and drive the best practice? Right, so this gets back to industry focus of the vendors, as I was talking to earlier. Each vendor has different industries that they specialize in, and they're going to have different features and functions and capabilities or decision drivers that they focus on. They're going to make your best practices happen because they already know what they are. Now, of course, the purchase of a new ERP is going to consider costs and contracts. What's the first-year cost? What's the 5-year cost? How do these costs compare with what you're doing now? Be honest about all the employee costs, and when will you begin to see your return on investment? The next 3 factors are all part of risk to finish out of 5. The company risk is the next factor, which is how big are they, the company that you're buying from, not your company, right? Will they be there tomorrow? Is the software going to be there tomorrow? What's their plans on that company/product that you're buying from? Maybe the product you're looking at really isn't their go-forward product. And there's technology and platform risk. Do they have a cloud offering? Does the technology support your needs? Right, so are they in a recent database? Can you see that they've reinvested in the product, that they have a great look and feel about the product that they're putting forward? And then implementation and support risk. How are they experienced within your market, right? Do they have a fairly large implementation team? What's support look like? Are you working through a partner or not? All of these are risks, but you really need to understand. So if you've looked at the right couple of vendors or a few, and they all have similar costs, it's these risk factors that are really drive your final decision. Okay, so that was just the definition of where you need to go. Now, business case for change. In this section, we're going to cover exactly how to make that happen, how to build the case for change mechanically, and what should be included. We're going to show you the elements of an ROI. So first section was definition. This section is kind of a how-to. I'm going to go through each bullet point by bullet point here. So when you're developing an ROI, we've defined, oh my gosh, I'm on this page, about 15 different factors that you should consider when you're developing that ROI. The first is inventory management. This one we see all the time on almost all of our projects, that by having better visibility to the sales demand and project forecast, inventory can better be managed and carrying costs significantly reduced. Additionally, the viability to slow-moving and dead inventory can be quickly identified and dealt with, right? So inventory management should be the top of your list you need to consider when you develop that ROI. Next is supply chain management. A better understanding of your network from a supplier to plant to customer is what supply chain is, so that integration between them all. Sales management, we're looking at better close rates and knowing the pipeline and being focused on the right deals. Sorry, I got that out of order. And that was product development. In product development, we're looking at R&D and the capabilities there, driving future efforts. So how can our ERP system support that? And then in pricing and margin management, we're looking at robust pricing tools that have enhanced visibility of the margin and profit analysis, which will drive improved competitive positioning and help us with some of that PLM work in the product development area. A comprehensive PLM analysis can drive changes in the company's overall portfolio as well to take full advantage of the 80-20 rule and driving higher profitability by working on the more profitable products. Forecasting was alluded to when we talked about the inventory management piece, and it's a critical aspect of driving inventory and service levels as well. And that's the part that we tend to forget. We're not just trying to lower inventories, but we're trying to maintain or increase our service levels to our customers. As we look at production management, the ability to track and complete production orders will help us schedule adherence and customer service as well as cost management, right? So if we actually can make what we said we're going to make when we're supposed to make it, life's a lot easier and we can save money at that as well. Within quality management, we're really looking at the hidden costs here, which show up in scrap and rework. An ERP with the right quality module can really drive big benefits here. Employee retention is one of those things that's overlooked. It's really the look and feel, ease of use, integration with Microsoft Office, all those kind of end-user technology capabilities that really drive employees to, enjoy their job more, because the system they're working with, that they're working with a lot throughout the day, is making their job easier versus having to create everything in spreadsheets to work around. Warehouse management's another key area that we're seeing more and more of today. The ability to promise shipments to your customers begins with managing the warehouse and the inventory record accuracy within that. So this is something we're seeing more and more today. We're seeing projects that are just WMS focused, actually. Financial management, of course, is something that indirectly is going to benefit you, but let's talk in real terms. What if you know your profit and loss within a few days of the month end? What if you can look at your P&L mid-month? These are indirect benefits. Would you change what you're doing if you knew more? So a direct benefit could be a reduction in AR as well, with better invoicing and credit management. Another factor would be e-commerce extensions, opening up direct-to-consumer, selling channels, consolidating. Robust e-commerce solution capabilities is another thing you should look at. In today's market, that's where everyone's going. Okay, so if we look at this model, in a business case for change, what we're really seeing here is, we talk about 99 significant opportunities. Okay, well, first of all, let me back up a second. This is actually an example we went through with one of our clients. So they had 99 significant opportunities and across 9 business functions. And so this is what they ended up with. The opportunities defined for them ended up with 10% in inventory, purchase costs. You can see 10% in productivity and 3% improvement in sales. But, by having all of this in place, they really had a sound foundation to drive their business case for change. So there's multiple dimensions of the evaluation, and, what we really want to look at isn't just about the ROI, but so it's not just about the money. As we saw in the 5 factors, it's about many other factors as well. So as you look at the ROI, you may see a clear difference between vendors 3 and vendors 1. And obviously the ROI of vendor 3 far exceeds the others. However, as we looked at this, our client selected vendor 1 because the implementation confidence outweighed the cost dimension, because the ROI of 69.2% remained an extremely attractive investment versus the 102 versus vendor 1. But the vendor 1 solution was deemed to be the best overall fit for this client. So what's interesting is that we went through all of that work, right, defining everything. They had, as I pointed out here, 99 significant opportunities. And what they saw was great, but I still think vendor 1 long-term is the best solution we need. It's not just about the payback we thought we'd receive. Okay, so as we move forward then, we want to talk more about this change in action. To achieve the benefit within 24 months, remember the first year is spent implementing. The software is purchased up front before the consulting services are paid for in year 1. The real benefits are not realized until year 2. And as these benefits are realized, if you do your homework and define the benefits, they need to be quantified and prioritized through the process, of course. There should be a clear roadmap of the features and functions as well as the process changes in that roadmap that's easy for everyone to understand, that should result in the probabilities or confidence intervals assigned to each. So the important thing is that we've defined it down to some sort of process or feature level that we can come back and say, hey, the reason we haven't achieved this benefit yet is because we haven't implemented this module or something, making it bigger picture. But in any event, you get the idea. There's specific things we need to achieve to be able to achieve the results we want to achieve. So what are those modules? What are their process improvements? What are those enhancements we're looking for the way we do it today? Let's keep track of those. There should be a direct benefit assigned to those. Or maybe say the other way. As you define the benefits, go back and define what the things are that are going to drive it. Okay, so in this case, with this client, one of the things, this is from our client, you can see how most of the outlay happens in year 0. For larger projects where the rollouts across multiple sites and functions, this outlay and implementation may happen over as much as 3 years. However, in all cases, we should expect a payback to begin in year 1 after go live. It will take most of that first year for the benefits to ramp up. So as an example, it may take most of that first year to work through the excess and obsolete inventories that you have that you never really understood were there until you were forecasting and planning inventory as well. Also in this chart, we can see the confidence intervals or probabilities of conservative versus target versus high achievement. So, so year 0 in this chart is our investment. Year 1, then we've got the blue of our, what we think is the conservative benefit, the gray is our target, and the yellow is our high benefit. So you can see if you just kind of eyeball that $5 million investment plus the 3 or 4 million in year 1 plus the whatever it looks like about $500,000 in year 2, right? So we should be able to achieve our payback by the end of that, what's here is 1, which is really the second year of the project. Okay, now to just kind of get into a little bit more, this is something we've developed. Ultimately, you should establish a baseline savings graph so you can see what's happening. And sorry for the confusion here. This one has year 1 as the first year of investment versus year 0 on the last slide. I kind of like it better this way. The whole year 0 gets kind of confusing. But in any event, this is a standard thing that we do with our clients. And this is where you can see significant investment in year 1 as on the previous chart, year 0. But you're getting into year 2 and beyond, there is far more steady improvement than the actual costs associated as we go forward. So the break-even point is somewhere between that, somewhere in that year 2 or year, after year 2 before year 3 happens. Okay, so that's how to get that ROI put together. Let's talk about some areas of ROI and talk through a few case studies to give you more examples to kind of help you understand how this works. So the first one here is a customer that I work with. They make children's toys, big wheels, that kind of stuff. They had an old AS400 system. They were looking at supply chain improvements because they were integrated with China. They had an extensive supplier network. The business is growing, obviously, so this is a great company to work with. They had new technologies they were looking to implement, and they needed real-time visibility. So that's what they were really lacking because so much was done out of their building. How did I really keep track of what was going on? So what we helped them with was really to drive their future state definition, their business case for change, their implementation project management, and we also performed their supply chain project management and helped them with forecasting because they had some needs there that they weren't able to fill. We had a structured ERP process. We also negotiated the software contracts. At the end of the day, I think the real exciting things are that they saw a top-line revenue during the time of this project increase by 60%. Now, was it the ERP project? Completely no. They were doing a lot of exciting things in marketing, but we certainly helped, right? They increased direct-to-consumer sales by 600%. A lot of this was because that they knew what they had in inventory and they were able to sell it. They had 0 headcount additions during the project. I think this one's huge. So one of the things in a growing business you need to look at when you're doing an ROI is to say, not just where did I save money, but if my business doubled or tripled, I'm not saying their business doubled or tripled, but if you're projecting your business to double over 3 years, can you maintain your headcount? That's a huge benefit. In their case, they actually reduced some headcount as well in some of their other operations. In the warehouse, they were able to improve their 3PL warehouses and save $350,000 annually by factoring in increased sales volumes as part of that number. But the $350K annually was because of just better management of that 3PL network with an ERP system. Prior to that, a lot of this was done in spreadsheets. They had a basic ERP. It was an old-fashioned manufacturing system that didn't really help them with all the suppliers and 3PLs that they had. Okay, next example is a distributor of performance enthusiasts, market products. It's kind of high-end auto parts, if you will. If they heard me talking, they'd say it's much more than that. Having said that, they've had some data integrity issues, reporting issues. They had a whole big reliance on spreadsheets, many manual processes. So they had grown by acquisition, and they really needed a new system. So as in the previous one, I didn't list out all the details here. We helped them out with the current future state maps, and we helped them implement the system. Having said that, year one, they're looking at a 50% inventory reduction, and year two, they're looking at another 50% inventory reduction after go live. So that's not 100%, that's not additive, right? It's 50 of 50. And their ongoing benefits are roughly $3 million a year. Now that inventory reduction wasn't just inventory. There were some other factors in there. So let me show you this next slide, just so you understand where that came from. You can see here what they called inventory. Well, a lot of it was also reduction in purchase costs, right? So it wasn't just that they were managing their inventory better. They were increasing sales, operation productivity, purchase costs, computer maintenance, and inventory carrying costs, of course. So this is where it broke out for them. And this is a great way of looking at it, by the way. If you can manage to get this high level, this will really help sell your executive team. Okay, our third example in this section, third and last, is it was a manufacturer of data loggers and chart recorders. So what's interesting is all three of these examples chose different ERP systems. This choice here, they actually went with a cloud solution, and what we helped them through was defining analysis of the current state, as we did with the other ones, defining the future state and going through that selection. But we also really helped them understand where cloud computing might be more beneficial for them and also help with their ROI. So within supply chain management, they actually reduced the shipment process time by 35%. This is the picking, packing, also the person booking the shipment. So all the work it took to get the product out the door was reduced by 35%, and at the same time, they increased their accuracy by 25%. So that's pretty cool. Reduced the amount of time it took, and I was better at it. Then the other big area for them was reducing their finished good on-hand inventory by 10%. Like I said, always start your project there. If you're not having a finished good effect on your project, then there's probably something wrong. And the opposite side of that is the inventory accuracy increased to 98.5% across all locations. So they're actually able to increase their inventory record accuracy, which is a big deal, right? Because now they can better plan. Okay, so next section, investments in people and process, right? To achieve the ROI, there's multiple investments that need to be made in three areas: the people in your organization, the underlying processes like order to cash, the technology supporting these processes are your people. The details of how to connect the dots to the ROI is what these things really are. And how do we determine that inventory was such a big factor in ROI? Well, it came from this effort. Okay, investments in people, process, and technology. So the first thing is to go through your process, and this is something was part of what we helped our clients with in all the three examples that we presented there, which is first designing that future state, right? First, you got to know who you are, and where you're going. But to get to that, you need to start with a current state identification. This is your analysis of what you do today. Then you want to go through and put together some sort of vision about what this means to you. So we need to consider what the capabilities are in technology today, what best practices are out there, and we probably are starting to look at some of the vendors at this point just from an education perspective to know what's possible. And then we get into defining what our future state looks like. So this is where the team is actually going to start working together. We're going to close with who this team is and how to form it. But just know that there's a team here that's in place. So it's not just one person that's supposed to put all this together. You know, the last section, the ROI, there's a lot of numbers there, a lot of data crunching. It's probably your project manager and your head of finance or your controller that's working on all that together and really pulling that from these teams. So the last couple of slides was probably a couple individuals working on it. This is where really we have a full-blown team in place, which is the beginning of our design process, frankly. So, the next couple slides, the first slide there was how-to, right? So current state, visioning, future state. Now I'm going to talk through an example. This is kind of our fourth example for the day that we spent time with another client. And one of the things that came out of working with them was reprioritization of their people into new departments and having new efficiencies through the ERP. So as we redesigned their process, we ended up having to redesign the people and where they sat and what they did, because the jobs changed because the ERP was such a big change from where they were. The other part then, right, was the organizational piece, right, who the functional silos were, if you will. We identified the gaps in the structure, and we aligned the resources and these individuals to this new structure. Another thing that we were able to do with this client is we were able to help them build out the functionality of that future state, and we also introduced this S&OP process to help with sales and operations planning. We helped them with some MRP organization to handle the shop floor. We introduced a production forecast department, right? So they actually started forecasting for real versus someone in the planning area just kind of saying, well, this is what we did last year. And the ERP system was allowed to evaluate the resources against the organizational need, and they were actually able to shift people around. So at the center of this S&OP and forecasting was really getting their organization in alignment, right? So we have management thinking one thing is going on and something else happening on the shop. So this S&OP and production forecasting effort was at the center for them to actually get everybody in alignment. Okay, so the next thing we were able to work with them, once we had everyone in alignment, we kind of understood where we were going. We really wanted to make sure that we were looking at the right technology, and the technology improvements were going to, grow and, be on the same side of where the business needs to go. So they had issues with all of these things on the left-hand side. They didn't have continuity or disaster recovery. They didn't have the right infrastructure in place. Their security wasn't great. They didn't really have a great service level, so say extra downtime. The standards of technology were not established. It was kind of all over the map, which made it hard for IT to govern. And then the workforce was becoming more mobile, so it was a moving target. What we ended up finding was some of the existing staff were great. Some of it was being outsourced, and other things were, we really had to help them understand with an assessment to determine where their needs would go. So, these are the things you're looking at, right? After we've defined where we want to go as a business, let's make sure we define our technology and make sure that technology is in support of where we want to go as well. So we go into the cloud, we're staying in-house. If we're staying in-house, given the new vision of where we want to go, let's relook at our team. So eventually, the technology focus for this client led us to the plant floor, where we found a great list of improvements for ROI. So the funny thing is, as we went back to look at technology, we saw at the plant level, if we could connect the plants and the warehouses together, if we had bombs and routings, which they didn't have, barcoding and wireless scanners, handheld devices, they had a GPS locator because they're doing some field service work, and then the ability to connect PLCs on the floor with the ERP was also a big saving. So a lot of these were actually technology capabilities, not just features and functions from your ERP. Actually, most of these, the only one that's really feature function is the bomb routing. So having said that, these are all the things that they were able to do that led to that ROI as well, that were based off of the technology. Okay, so that's a recap of that client and kind of how to get into the details of making that ROI happen. The next section here is really what's that team look like, and then we'll close. So the team here is about having the right team in place to establish the framework of improvements as defined by your future state, and to stay focused on that during the selection and drive the improvements during the implementation. So this team is in here for the duration. The team you'll need to put in place is to manage this project from beginning to end. So they need to be open-minded. They also need to understand where the business is. So that's a unique person to really know the business, and then be open-minded in how to change it. The team begins with the steering team. It's critical to have the right executives at the table. In a smaller organization, it might be really easy to understand. And here we had different roles, right? The CEO, the CFO. Charlie was the partner on this with Ultra. This is an example. And then there's a regional manager and an account executive from Ultra was part of this team. But in general, you're going to see, right, CEO, CFO, whatever that steering team looks like, the key executives, their role is to really remove the roadblocks, help get things approved, and promote change. A key member of the steering team, though, is the executive sponsor. In this case, I'm not sure who it was. I think it might have been the Vice President of Information Services. This individual will sit, and it's typically, by the way, typically the head of IT, the head of some sort of planning function, or the head of finance. It's usually one of those three individuals that's our executive sponsor. And this individual will sit on the weekly status meetings with the project manager, and he or she will also be intimate with all of the details of the project, the goals, and the roadblocks. Their job, in addition to the role of steering team, is that to be a communicator with the rest of the steering team. The conduit between the steering team, the project team, they're the conduit between the steering team and the project team. Therefore, choosing the right executive sponsor is critical to the success of the project. They need to be respected by the organization and be able to filter real issues from just the plain old bumps in the road. So a really important role is who's that person. Okay, the other important role, and probably potentially even more important than that person who's the executive sponsor, is the project manager. They're the real leader of the project. He or she owns the project, the plan, all the deliverables, as well as communicating with the executive sponsor on all the open issues. Project manager is also in charge of risk management and communication of these as well. In our scenario here, we had someone from Ultra who sat next to the project manager to really help them through this effort. Okay, then we need to have a team that's made up cross-functionally. This team of the project needs to have, everyone represented. These individuals are not only responsible for the overall success of the implementation, but they're also responsible for achieving the improvements and the best practices within their functional silos. Each improvement in the ROI should be assigned to one person, one silo, if you will, even if it crosses multiple silos. So pick the main person responsible that has the most things changing in their group that's going to drive those benefits. These individuals, in some ways, are all managing individual mini projects. So it's really important to have the right team in place. As part of this team, there will be someone from an external consultant like Ultra who's driving best practices. Then the next thing here is we look at the team structure of transformation. The technology team lead is led by a project manager or PMO. This technology team is also responsible for all the tech, right? Sometimes part of this is outsourced. The project team from the previous slide will aid in the technology team and the configuration and testing and data migration, testing of the production environment and security. Scaling the database management, patching, upgrade, disaster recovery all need to be handled by this team, unless, of course, you've bought into a true cloud solution. Then the vendor is going to take on those responsibilities. So, as you look at this list, the last four where it says cloud question mark are things that maybe you've outsourced. So this is the way the team looks all put together. I know it's kind of hard to see. I think if you took a screenshot and zoomed in, you might be able to pick it all up. But in this view, we can see how the team is pulled together. The size of the team will be directly proportional to the size and scope of the project, which is typically driven by the size and complexity of the business. So we have projects that have as few as 5 people on the whole project, and we have others as large as 50. This one looks like a pretty big project here that Charlie was working on. The arrows or connections are the responsibility of the project management. So if you look at all those green arrows, someone's got to own that. Those aren't just there for pretty pictures. Someone's got to own all those communications. In some cases, it's the project manager. In some cases, it's the executive sponsor. But between the two of them, they need to own these connections and demonstrate the need for communication. This typically takes place in the form of weekly meetings, status reports with and from the employees involved and the executive team as well. Okay, Kristen, I think I'm ready to turn it over to you.
We are moving on to Q&A, so get your questions in and we'll make sure that we get you some answers. Also wanted to highlight here some of our white papers that I think you'll find interesting as you continue on with this search. We do have a wide offering of white papers on industry best practices as you move forward with that journey. So you can go to any of those at ultraconsultants.com/ERP-education, and I will send you a link to those as well. So George, I do have a question for you. We're still considering moving forward with an ERP selection. What's a good place to get started in understanding if the project is going to be worth the cost?
Great. I think it's back to that initial slide where we listed the 15+ different things that you should look at. Try to get a high-level understanding of where you might save money. So that's one place to start. The other place to start is with the executive team and just talk with them about what their thoughts are on this. You'd be surprised how many of the executive team members probably don't like the ERP system for some reason. So how do we turn their needs into the need for this new system then? So it's a twofold effort. One, kind of blocking and tackling those 15+ cost factors we identified. And then two, hearing from the executive team. We've seen, I'd say, at least, half of our projects have a key requirement is more information for the executive team. So it's kind of what's in it for them.
All right, thanks, George. And so we've got another question in. Do you see any common mistakes when projects fail to see ROI?
Well, it was something I tried to highlight throughout the presentation. I don't know if you guys picked up on it, but it's really important, first of all, to document the ROI really well. Having said that, I've gone back and talked with many a successful project, and I've heard many people say, yeah, well, we didn't document it as well as we would have, and if we would have, we'd have really known that there was this huge benefit here we didn't know about. Okay, well, those are the successful people that just made it happen anyway. There's a lot of people that aren't successful because they just didn't document it well enough. So if I don't know what I'm supposed to improve, then I don't get the benefit. What happens is we go through all this work, documenting things, we understand what we want to do, we select the right vendor, and then we get into this implementation, and let's just get the software up and running, and we forget the benefits. So it's a matter of keeping track of what the benefits are we're trying to achieve, so we don't just shove those new processes to the side to get the software installed. So it's about managing that implementation to those specific benefits. The implementation and the benefits together need to line up to have success.
Thanks, George. Got another one for you. This one is kind of a two-parter. What is the most frequently recommended ERP product from Ultra these past couple of years? Are there any new rising ERP products or any ERPs that are starting to be outdated from, Ultra's independent consultant perspective?
Well, from an Ultra perspective, our clients tend to be our clients go a long range. They could be anywhere from smaller companies, as small as 5 or 10 million in revenue, and upwards of a couple billion. But in the middle there, many of our clients really start to look at the top 6 or 7 ERP vendors that are $1 billion in revenue. So if you look at it, there's 6 or 7 vendors that are $1 billion plus. And then there's a couple that are hundreds of million in revenue. And then there's a bunch of ERP vendors that we would call Tier 3 that are under 50 million in annual revenue. So that's a huge spread. So what we see is really 6 or 7 vendors with about 15 products tend to be, they win 90% of our projects. And then maybe 1 out of 10 is that Tier 3 solution. And then on the second, what was the second part of the question, Kristen?
Are there any rising or falling stars?
Well, I don't want to call anybody out as falling, but hire us and we'll help you with that one, I guess. But rising, what we're really seeing, without calling out anyone specifically, is we are seeing a move to cloud, and all of the vendors are going there. So if someone's not going to cloud, and this is where most of the Tier 3s are having trouble because it's a huge investment, then there's some concern, because what we're seeing, I think it's well over half of our projects now are going some sort of cloud or 100% hosted where the vendor owns everything solution, whereas 2-3 years ago was maybe 10 to 25%. So huge influx. It's actually not even 1 to 2 years ago, it was probably 10 to 25, and now it's over half. So cloud computing, whether it be something like almost cloud where it's completely hosted and the vendor owns the whole thing, or it's some sort of true cloud solution like Salesforce, those are the types of things we're seeing that are really taking off.
Thanks, George. One more for you. Got a lot of questions today, and just to let everyone know, we still have a couple minutes, so if there are any other questions, feel free to send them in via chat or the Q&A feature. So our next question is about software selection. When you're looking at vendors, is it possible to just take the top 3 frequently used vendors in your industry instead of having to look at everybody?
Yeah, I think that sometimes it's possible, sometimes it's not. So, you know, frankly, you've hit on something that we always talk about at Ultra. It's should we have, we call it a long list or a short list. Should we have a long list of 3 or 4? I'm sorry, should we have a short list of 3 or 4, or should we have a long list of, you know, 6 to 8? And then if we're doing a long list process, we'll start with some sort of interview session up front, not just a simple form that we're filling out. So we'll interview everybody, feed that back, we'll see some brief demos, and then we'll make a short list decision. So I know I didn't quite answer the question there. So we go back and forth on that as well. The answer isn't that clear. In some cases, like if you're a larger organization, I would say at least 250 and for sure over $500 million in revenue, you probably should only be looking at the true tier 1 vendors. That's SAP, Oracle, Inforce, M3 or LN products, IFS, and then Microsoft, their really long name, but the thing that Microsoft Dynamics 365, Finance and Operations, Enterprise, which is formerly AX. Those are the things you should be looking at. So in that case, if that's where you're going to start, and then you start looking at the verticals by industry like we talked about before, it could be really easy to come up with a short list. And then there's some other micro verticals as you get into it that it's much easier to come up with a short list. If you're a medium-sized food company, we have a lot of companies that, a lot is relative. We have a number of clients that are that type of organization. It's really easy to come up with a short list of mid-market or tier 2 ERPs that's only, you know, 3 to 4 long. So it depends on your industry. Having said that, it's your industry and then your specific requirements. You know, I hate to keep talking about the next webinar. We go through the webinar in the one with creative. What we've put into there is we're going to talk about decision drivers. And those decision drivers will help you filter out who the vendors are you want to work with. The problem is it's not always evident by just saying, hey, someone else has this software. You know, we see a lot of people go that way, where a lot of people within an industry have bought some sort of software. It doesn't always make sense. So it's more important to really look at what your needs are from a driver perspective and then compare that within the industry verticals and who the right vendors are. So you're always probably going to have a half a dozen or so, but to get it down to 3 or 4, you really need to understand that list, unless it's something unique, like I said, you're a tier 1 or you're a tier 2 food and bev. So I know that's not answering it. The real answer is it depends, and it depends on, you know, who you are, how big you are, and what vertical you're looking at, because the list may be longer or shorter.
Thanks, George. And to all of our attendees, I did chat you a link to the webinar that George is referencing earlier, so that will be in your chat window. And we did have one more question come in for you. You mentioned putting together a future state before you selected software. How accurate can you expect that to be?
Without getting into all the details of how you go through process mapping, this is something that's been around that I personally worked on for over 20 years in consulting. So the idea is that you have some sort of level 0, which is who your company is. You have a level 1, which is a list of things you do. Then there's a level 2 map. And that's really what we talk about, current state, future state. That level 2 map should take into all considerations. So it might be order to cash. It might just be the order taking process. But somewhere, so we might have the order, the shipment, and the payable could be 3 separate maps, or you might just do an order to cash map. Right? It should be by functional silo, the silos are actually on the left. So you should see it's a swim lane type of map that we prefer to use, so you can actually see the handoffs within the organization. So the level of detail that we're going to go down to is to make sure we understand those key features that an ERP system is going to need. So we're not going to define every single step within how I take a customer order, right? But we're going to define the major things. You know, we're going to define how, you know, what the line items might be. We're going to define, I guess, like credit terms, because everybody has credit terms, but we might define other things that are, maybe there's a credit check involved in our process that leaves the order processing team, crosses the line out to accounting. So it's kind of at that level. We were stopping at the transaction itself, so we call out the transaction, enter customer order, and maybe there's a few other boxes around it. So we're not getting to that, what we would call level 3. Level 3, the actual details of how to enter the customer order should be saved for when you go through the implementation with the actual partner you've chosen. So the point is this level 2 future state map is really giving you the vision of how you want to do things differently, specifically focused on the handoffs between organizations. I think as you saw in that previous slide with the one company that Charlie worked with, where we literally ended up having to redo the organizational structure itself to map out to the future state as they move forward. So it's a level 2 map with down to transaction level, but not every step within the transaction. So it's not that bad. There's probably, if you will, we usually use Visio, if you will, there's order to cash, procure to pay, plan to produce, there's some financials, and then there's some potentially other things like field service. And within that, if you say those are your 5 big things, and each one of those could have 2 to 3, so you could have upwards of 15 maps, and you could have as few as 7 or 8. And each one of those maps should be 2 to 3 pages wide as you look at Visio. So it's not huge, but it's definitely a lot of work. It takes us usually, when we're working with our client, not full time, but in a lapsed time where maybe we're working on it, I don't know, 20 hours a week. It usually takes us about 3 to 4 weeks to work that through with a client. It could be shorter if we have a more intensive project and we can rotate between teams. So you could get it done within 2 weeks, but that's someone leading that the whole time. If you're doing it on your own, I'd say plan on at least 4 weeks, if not a little bit more, to work through that.
Thanks, George. And that's going to wrap us up for all the questions that we have today. Thank you again, George, for braving the flu to educate all of us today. Did want to thank all of our attendees for joining us. We really appreciate your participation, and we will see you at the next webinar. We wish everyone a great rest of your week, and we'll see you in a couple of weeks. Thanks so much. Bye-bye.